if you were going into any season saying like these 15 things are important, none of them are important because you couldn't narrow it down to one or two things.
Hello and welcome to the episode of the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. I am your host, Neil Horowitz. Hit me up on Twitter, NJH287, also on LinkedIn, where you can see more content. The website where you can see everything is dsmsports.net. And of course, the podcast is available for you to subscribe and consume on whichever podcast platform is your favorite. A tremendous show for you guys today. I am so excited to bring this guest to you. I've been following his career for a long time. He is truly one of the best in the business. Really thoughtful, articulate, really gets it. So much insight, so much good wisdom here. My guest on the podcast today is Zach Galia. He is the director of social media and content strategy for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Just such a wealth of knowledge. So listen up. Here he is. You're going to learn a lot from Zach Galia of the Pittsburgh Pirates. I am back on the podcast with today's guest, and I'm so excited to be talking to him. I have wanted to have him on for so long. I've been following his career. Feels like forever. Continuing to do great things. My guest on the podcast today is Zach Galia. He is Director of Social Media and Content Strategy for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Welcome to the podcast today, Zach.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm excited to be here.
Hell yeah. It's going to be so great to pick your brain. You have so much dang knowledge, such awesome experience, and great insights to offer. But before we get into the meat of our discussion, Zach, tell us about your career path. Tell us about all the stops along the way. You have a not a traditional career path, but once you got in, you definitely got in. And any tips for folks that want to try to do what you do?
Yeah, I mean, the traditional career path, I don't know if that's a thing in this career, to be honest. Like especially when getting into the industry when we did, where it was like everyone was still trying to figure it out, and it was so young. And like even in like my my LinkedIn bio and stuff like that, it's I started when you couldn't share video on Twitter, and TikTok and Snapchat didn't exist, and Instagram was still just like the most random things and photo, like, so it's really interesting to see how far it's come. And like I had no idea that this was going to be a career or something that was even possible to kind of build my life around. And so it's awesome to see kind of how the industry's grown. But yeah, for me, like I went to college, play hockey was the big goal, and knowing that I wasn't going to the NHL afterwards, it was, I have 4 years to figure out what's next. And I always loved sports, always loved the creative side of things, and painting and writing. And so it was like I wonder if there's got to be something out there where I can merge the two. And so when I first got to school, I thought I was going to be an architect, and then realized how much books and supplies cost. So I dropped that within a week, and it was back to kind of the drawing board, like what do I do? And so took some random classes and, got some stuff out of the way. And then it was, I had a class with, it was all about kind of like the history of communication and media. So it was like about, radio and film and TV, and it was just, everything about it was just everything I wanted to be a part of, and fell in love with kind of the film side of things, and was going to go to film school after undergrad, got accepted to New York Film Academy, then realized how much that actually cost, and wasn't trying to go another $200,000 in debt. So decided to try and figure something else out. So I had a couple odd jobs, a sales job. I worked as an admissions counselor at my school. I coached women's hockey for a little bit. And then like a former classmate of mine was working at the local NASCAR track in Michigan. And so it was like they were looking for someone to do some video work, kind of revamp their YouTube channel, all this kind of stuff. And so I interviewed, got the job, thought that, I was kind of going in that video production kind of career path. Now I was like, okay, I think I know what I'm supposed to do. Then within kind of a month of the job, my boss called me and it was like, you're not really living up to expectations, which anyone who knows me and kind of my quest for perfection, that kind of crushed my soul, to my core. But basically it was like, she said, I thought you would have taken over all of the social media accounts by now. And I was like, I didn't even know that was part of the job. Consider it done. And then from then on, I reached out to anyone who would talk to me, whether it was within our company, throughout different sports teams, whoever would jump on the phone and just talk through like, how do you do this stuff? And so, learned all I could, and, was doing all the video. I was, graphic design, the early days of, I did everything. I did a little bit of everything. So yeah, like one man band and did a little bit of everything. And then it was, I think I finally kind of found my footing and was like, this is something I could see myself doing. And so luckily enough, a couple of years into that job, the Steelers were looking for their first social media person, full-time person that they'd ever had. And I put my resume in. I probably applied to 200 or 300 jobs at that point and definitely didn't have my hopes up because it was like, this kid from, who's in Michigan working for a NASCAR track, like, why would I be the one? And so like, oddly enough, like out of all the applicants, I got an interview, drove to Pittsburgh, had another interview and got the job. And, always forever be grateful. Scott Phelps, Jeff Brown over at the Steelers, like for taking a shot on me and getting me started in kind of like what it actually meant to do what we do now. And so like, the Speedway, there was, I think 4 of us or 5 of us in our little team, but our team was like, we covered PR, we covered all of digital, we covered like, it was a ton of different departments into one department, 5 people. And, you get to the Steelers and there are huge departments for each of the things that one of us did in NASCAR. So then it was like, not only learning how to do this for like a global brand that everyone recognizes, but like, how do you work with all these other teams instead of it just being like you go down the hall and talk to the one person you talk to all day anyway and work through a partnership deal? Like now it's, oh no, we have like 20 people who do at the Steelers. So working through that, growing, learning, like really found my footing there and met a lot of great people through the NFL and some of which I still keep in contact to today. Just picking their brains and, working together and figuring this stuff out. And so 4 years with the Steelers was ready for kind of that next step, being a manager director. And luckily enough, the Arizona Cardinals were looking for one. Had never been to Phoenix, had never been to Arizona.
Yeah.
So the full interview. And my wife and I, we went for it. We moved all the way out there. It was amazing. One of the greatest, stops that I've ever had. And, I'm so thankful to be able to be out there for a few years and learn from the people I did. And, but, like they were kind of in a transitional period too, where, I was director of social, then I was director of digital content, then I was director of digital strategy, and each step kind of taking more under my wing and being able to learn more about, the apps and the website and, video production and helping the team and all that kind of stuff. So learned a ton there. And then, my wife and I we had our first kid, our little girl, and it's time to come home. And, she's from outside of Toronto. I'm from Pittsburgh. Couldn't be that far away from grandparents. So luckily enough, this job, Pirates came up, moved back home, and been happy ever since. And just, working every day to, like we were talking about before, like not only make an impact, on content and social and everything that the Pirates are doing, but like, the team that I've been able to hire and the people that I get to work with and, really coming into my own and trying to figure out, the type of leader I want to be and how I can really help people. So, it's been really cool and really rewarding. And, it's nice to be in black and gold again.
Love to hear it. We're going to get into all of that. And I'll tell you, see, the Pirates have had like a sneaky, in my mind at least, has a sneaky good reputation for social, even prior to your time there. Like they've always kind of punched above their weight. And so I'm glad to see them continue to, build upon that legacy by bringing in someone like yourself.
Yeah, man. Like shout out to Terry Rogers, Caitlin Koffel, Alondra, no, Sierra, I believe was her last name. She got married, and maybe her maiden name. But basically, like Terry was the one. Like I knew Terry whenever I was working with the Steelers, and like he helped me kind of develop some different things and like really value him and his expertise. And but yeah, I mean, like coming into this situation, this was the most stable situation that I'd come into, where they already had a great foundation laid and there were great people in place and like, have moved on since then. But like, we wouldn't be where we are today without all of the work that they put in before I got here. So like you said, it was amazing coming into a situation where it was like, man, the Pirates are already good at this stuff. Like how am I going to help take it to the next level? And it kind of, pushed me to figure some stuff out.
I'm holding myself back. We're not getting too far ahead of myself here because the reason I like starting off with these career path chats and the career journeys is one, just so people have an idea of where you're coming from and how you built up your background, but also to kind of hear like how you develop those early foundational principles that, especially in the early days of social, where some things that all of us learned in those early days still very much hold true today, and some things don't. But certainly like so I want to bounce back a little bit to your time at that NASCAR Speedway, Michigan National Speedway. Um, Especially because I know you weren't a motorhead growing up. You didn't eat, breathe, and eat, sleep, and breathe NASCAR. Easy for me to say. So I want to hear what it was like for you first to just learn about that audience, and also just the business of what it meant to work for a speedway, because it really is. You have stuff going on throughout the year here and there, but it's spiking up. If you had it's make or break for those, 1 or 2 weekends, depending on how many races that you host. So it's something like what it was like learning that sport, learning that audience, and then also kind of building the plan as you went in terms of social media strategy.
Yeah, I mean, I will always credit that position with me being good at making something out of nothing. Like, we had 2 races a year. We had like a wine and beer fest, and we had a country music festival. And that was like, I think that was April, May, June, July. And that was it. Those were our 4 events. And like, there was obviously like little things that happened around, but like, that was it. So it was like, okay, so other than these like 4 weeks of the year, how do I get people to care about a plot of land with a road on it for 11 months? Yeah. And so that's where, like, that's the creativity is like, I got to figure this out. Like, this is my job. I got to dig into it. I got to figure out what's interesting and go for it. So that was a big part of it. But like, it almost like, it was almost the perfect opportunity, because when I was getting into NASCAR, and I'm sure it's still kind of the case today, but like, we were marketing to exactly me, like mid-20s casual fans who like don't really know much about NASCAR, but like to go party, go experience events, like see music, like basically like marketing to me of like, how do I get people like me interested in NASCAR? And that's a much easier task, is like, we'll just make stuff that I like. And that it worked for the time that I was there. It was like, I was basically marketing to myself the whole time, and it worked. I mean, it's a different beast. I'm sure we'll get to it later on, but like, it's a different beast in every place you go. And like, working for the Steelers, and the audience with the Steelers is different than, the Cardinals, even though they're in the same sport. Same with the Steelers and the Pirates, like same city, but different sport, like different fans. So yeah, I mean, it was really cool. And I will always love and respect kind of the science behind all of the NASCAR performance and the cars. And we got to go tour Hendrick Motorsports. I think it was in Charlotte, go to NASCAR Hall of Fame on one of the summits. But like, it's amazing to see all of the kind of intricacies that go into just building these cars and getting them ready, and the pieces and the parts and the performance of, the pit crew and everything. Like, all of these very, very little minute things matter to the bigger picture. Now, I am not a person who enjoys watching cars go in circles for 4 hours, but I very much respected like not only all the science and all the engineering, all the work that went in to get the cars to where they are, but then the guy who's sitting in the driver's seat driving 200 miles an hour 3 inches from the car in front of him, when it's like, I'm sitting in traffic and going nothing, and it's stressful. So like, it was definitely a humbling experience. But it's, I didn't watch NASCAR before. I don't think I've watched NASCAR since I've left the sport, but it was a great first step, and one I'm very thankful for.
Yeah, and it forced you to think about really what you're trying to accomplish. I mean, you're not necessarily speaking to, you're just talking to like general NASCAR fans in some ways, but it's not like a team job where like people are a fan of the team, where they're going to root for wins and losses, and also too, I think that you're really marketing the experience, where like I've been to one NASCAR race. I've been to hundreds of whatever baseball games, hockey games, etc. And yet that NASCAR race sticks with me because of the unique experience of seeing all the people there, seeing what the atmosphere is like, being on the infield before the race, and like seeing how up close you are with that, and hearing the sound of the cars, and so it forces you to think through like, okay, yes, there's a sport, a competition here, and some people are gonna. For some people, it's a huge tradition. They're going to bring in their RVs and they're going to have their flag waving of whoever their team is, whoever their driver is. But it's also it's about all of it. It's about the experience and not just, who wins the race at the end of the day. So I love kind of those early, those principles that stick with you.
Well, yeah. And I mean, it's very similar to like, it's more similar to baseball than I think it is to anything else. Cause like if you're going to, you're going to a football game, you're there to watch the game, right? Like you're going to sit in your seat, you're going to watch 80% of the action on the field, and you're going to go home happy or sad. You go to a baseball game, like you come to PNC Park, like there's so much going on, there's so much to do. There's, beer everywhere, there's great food. Like it's the experience. And then, you get the ball game as kind of a bonus. And it was the same with NASCAR. It's like there was so much happening, and like, you'd have people camping in the infield of our track for like a week in like whether it's a tent or like a camper, but like, just like they clearly weren't, like the race wasn't everything to them. It was the experience. And it was so much more than just one, 4-hour stretch where cars were going around in circles. Like I'm sure they enjoyed that too, but it was everything. It was like the whole experience was so, so cool.
Great. Great. And so then you make the move to the Steelers. Social media as an industry is barely becoming a thing, an actual real thing. You mentioned like you were the first like social media hire. So I mean, when you come in, and I want to both look at this from a hindsight perspective as well as what it was like at the time. How much of it was, Zach, like you know more than we do, figure it out. Here's some basic guardrails versus like, here's a plan that we want you to execute. And cause you were young coming in and you didn't have that leadership experience. And so like, how was it stepping into there and figuring out what does success look like? And what is my job? What should my job description be?
Yeah. I mean, I'll never forget like the night before, like my first day, so stressed out and like, just like trying to basically talk myself down of just like, well, it's not like you're going to go in and just like, they're going to throw you out to figure it out on your own. Like you'll have time to train, like all this stuff. And then I get there and it was like, here's a sticky note with the passwords on it, lunch is at noon. We'll see you then. And so like, and that's nothing like, I love the people I worked with there, but it was like, it's a new position. Like you don't know what you don't know. Like my first content calendar was like literally in like notes on my phone. I would just write like 10 a.m. I'm going to post this, and 1 p.m. I'm going to post this. And it was like, it was very much like looking back on it now, it was like, you're figuring out, like you're figuring things out in general, but you're also figuring out like, the content funnels that we call them, of like, what is out there that you could be talking about right now. And like I started in June, I believe, in 2015 with the Steelers. So it was like nothing time. Like mini camp was over. It was basically like the waiting game between mini camp and OTAs and training camp. So it was like nothing, like dead period for football. Nothing's happening. So it was like, go back to NASCAR. Like, what do I talk about when nothing's happening? It's like, well, let's highlight some of the guys from Steelers history. Let's highlight some of the games from Steelers history. Like, let's just figure stuff out. And like, it really, I mean, it's still the case today, but it was very much just like, let's throw everything at the wall and see what sticks and keep doing more of what does and less of what doesn't. And it was just the whole first year of that was just like, let's figure it out. And like, again, I'll never forget my first game was a Hall of Fame game in Canton against the Vikings, I believe. And I was down on the sidelines, like just walking around, trying to figure out where I was supposed to be or what I was supposed to do. The game started. I was still down on the sidelines, like with my phone. I'm like, I guess I should probably go to the press box. What am I supposed to do? So like, literally from that point to now, it's like, you're figuring out like how to cover entire weeks of games. Like it's so funny to see how far things have come. But yeah, I mean, it was just like just like, is kind of a staple in this industry. It was all about like trial and error and not being afraid to fail and not being afraid to put stuff out that wasn't any good. And just so you learn something of how to put stuff out that was good. And so, it probably took a couple years to actually figure out like, how do I do this? And like, what graphics do I need to develop for game days? And what graphics do I need to develop for off season? And like all this different stuff that like, you don't know what you don't know. And so you just kind of went into this vast space of just like you said, like, Zach, you know more than everyone. At that point, I had like 2 years experience in NASCAR. And so it was like, I guess I know more than anyone, but I don't know about that. And so it was like, it was a great learning experience for me and like my bosses and like trying to figure out like, what do we want this thing to become? Because like you go to Brazil, you go to Germany, you go to Australia and you're wearing a Steelers hat, people know what that is. Like, so that's a big, responsibility on your shoulders is like, we owe it. And, me being from Pittsburgh, it's like, I owe it to this team to give everything I got and figure this out to put them in the best light. So I got to figure out how to do that.
And the Steelers had like such, and still do have, of course, such a dedicated generational fan base. So when you're thinking about, and even as applies across any of your jobs you've had in the past, including now with the Pirates, are you speaking to those fans, those avid fans, those fans that want to know the X's and O's of the football game, who are going to be there for all of your organic content as much as they can, versus having that more casual fan mindset of I want to try to bring new fans into the fold or turn the fan who's maybe at a 3 on the spectrum into a 6 or a 7 or an 8. So and how that affects what type of content you want to produce and want to go after. So how is that mindset kind of, how did that first start off with the Steelers, and then how do you also see that at your other stops kind of in juxtaposition?
Yeah, I mean, I think with the Steelers, it was similar to NASCAR. It's like I was marketing to me, like a Steelers fan. Like I knew the lingo. I knew, how, like what the Steelers stood for, like, because I had a lifetime of following along and understanding and like knowing the history and knowing the players and, my dad being a Steelers fan and like you just knew that stuff. So it was like, again, like kind of an extension of NASCAR. I was more marketing to me than anything, which again, I like, for better or worse, or for right or for wrong, like that was kind of my intent, was like, if I like this stuff, I think our fans will, because I'm one of our fans. So like going from there to the Cardinals, where I wasn't a fan and I didn't know the history, I didn't know the fan base. Basically, like I left, my last thing was the 2019 NFL draft. So the year, I believe that was the year Kyler Murray went number 1. I had already accepted the job with the Cardinals, but my last thing with the Steelers was I was going to work the draft and help them get through, because we had already strategized and got it already. So I was working the draft for the Steelers. And then after the draft, I was done and was going to Arizona. So like, I basically that's end of April, you had like OTAs, minicamp, rookie minicamp, all this stuff that basically was like, there was no time to basically develop a strategy for the Cardinals. So I picked up what I was planning to do for the Steelers and dropped it in Arizona and said, here's what we're going to do. And it didn't work. Like it didn't have the same impact. It wasn't the same. I mean, we weren't a good football team that year. Obviously, like we had the number 1 pick the year before, but like that was the first kind of like, oh, I'm not marketing to me anymore. Like I need to learn the fan that I am marketing to. And so like, again, different markets, different teams, different fan bases, like you had to learn and figure out what they wanted to see and who they were and what they cared about. And again, like I'll always be a Cardinals fan for all the time that I spent there and all the, blood, sweat and tears you put into it. But like, that was the first time where it's like, I need to figure this out. It's not for me anymore. It's for this fan base. And so like, that was a great exercise to then, and again, like how social has grown, like you said, like you obviously want to do right by those diehard fans. But the more people out there that are talking about the Arizona Cardinals, the better. So you want to find casual fans. You want to find Suns fans who are looking for something to do on a Sunday. You want to find, NFL fans who are like, oh, that's a funny video by the Cardinals. Maybe I'll follow along. So it's like, you want to create content that's kind of accessible across the board, but also doesn't, not offend, but like it doesn't patronize like your diehard fans. So it's like, it's a much more wide range of content. And then again, like coming back to the Pirates, it's like I've been a Pirates fan my whole life, but it's a different vibe with the Pirates than it is with the Steelers. And like you have to figure out what that lane is and where you can really dive in and make an impact. And, you know, like I said, like you want to do right by all of your diehard Pittsburgh Pirates fans, but you also want to do right by the kid who just pulled a Paul Skeens card and doesn't really know anything about the Pirates, but knows Paul Skeens is a big deal and likes him. Well, it's like, how do we make that kid a fan now? So it's like, there's such a wide range of what you do, but it's, you know, it started with me marketing to me, but now it's like, I'm 38 years old, like, and I need to make videos for, you know, 16-year-olds on TikTok to make them interested in the Pirates. Like that's clearly not marketing to me anymore. Right. So it's like, how do you do that? How do you empower your team and, you know, the people on your team that are closer to that age group to do that? And so it's like, it's really cool how things have progressed.
Yeah. It's almost, I always like to joke, it's almost like a rite of passage when you post, when your organization posts something that you don't know why, it doesn't make any sense to you. You don't really get it, but the fans want it or the audience wants it. So therefore, like, this is not for me. You have to realize I'm not the audience anymore. And maybe I don't understand why this meme makes sense or what's going on with this trend, but it's going up there and it's going to be successful because we have done our homework. Or we have people on our team that have done their homework and know it. So I love that kind of mindset. Go.
Oh, yeah. And like my, one of my buddies who like I hired, he worked with me at the Steelers, he worked with me at the Cardinals. He's down. He works for Popeyes Chicken Social down in Miami. But shout out Q. He was like, I always called him my coolness coach. And it was like, he would come up with these ideas because he like super cool kid, nice kid, like always had his finger on the pulse, understood like culture and what we should be a part of. And he would come up with these ideas and I would be like, I don't get it. I don't get it. But do you think it's cool and it makes sense? And he's like, absolutely. I'm like, then post away and let me know how it does. But it's like, again, you have to build that trust with the people on your team because like, yeah, I mean, like him being like a young, cool guy, like he's going to know so much more about who we should be talking to in that age group than I do. Yeah. So it's like, if you want dad jokes and, you know, videos about bushcraft and people building cabins in the woods, like, I'm your guy. But like, if we're trying to attract a 17-year-old kid to come to a Pirate game, like it's probably not that. So it's just, it was always great to have, you know, people like that. And I have them on my team now where it's like, tell me what's cool. And if you think it's right, let's go with it and let's see what happens.
Yeah. Time is undefeated. We will all live long enough, hopefully, to become the how do you do fellow kids meme. The tablets, all of us. I want to kind of also discuss like the fact that you have been at these long, like generational franchises, as well as, you know, the Cardinals, who have maybe less of a brand than the Steelers historically. And something that hit me early on, I think a lot of folks, is social media, whether we realize it or not, back in the early 2010s, like your voice was becoming formed. You were speaking on behalf of the brand. And oftentimes I was thinking in my head, like, is our VP of comms or does our VP of marketing even realize that we're kind of inadvertently creating this brand or this tone, this voice, and I'm kind of like riffing on it and doing it without any sort of direction. And so like, how'd you kind of see this more? And I feel like in the last few years in particular, there's been a much stronger interest and dedication to having a strategic brand, having, you know, documented guidelines, and here's what we're trying to do. So how did you kind of see that bubble up throughout your career of, we have a plan. This is our brand. This is our voice. This is our tone. And also too, like how that changes and goes up and down, or how flexible it is depending on the performance of the team. Because you've been at different places as well, where sometimes you're winning and sometimes you are, you know, trying to get through the games.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it's funny because like early on, like with NASCAR, like it was just me doing everything. So it's not like I didn't really have to put anything on paper or think through it too much because it was just me. Like everything that gets posted is me and my voice and the voice that I'm developing. So like we're good. Same with the Steelers. It was me. So it was like, there was never really a ton of like, you know, here are the guidelines here, because it's like, I know the guidelines, I've lived through them, I've developed them myself. And then getting to the Cardinals, where there already been, like, it wasn't me building something from scratch, right? Like there already been a team, there was a team in place before I got there. So it wasn't me coming in and being like, oh, well, I do everything anyway. So like, it doesn't matter. So it was like, I think later on with the Steelers, there was probably a little bit more kind of developing and thought of like, how do we put this stuff on paper instead of just it being in my brain?
Even if it's
And
brain though, like still to even have like an intentionality with it, to like say that I'm not just making this up off the cuff. Like we are a sarcastic team, or we're not, or we are a team that is really steeped in history and are very formal, or we're not, or we're the scrappy upstart, or whatever it might be. So yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt, but yeah, like there was something happening in your head.
yeah, and again, like I think you go back to the Browns when they were just awful, like 0-8 or 0-17 because we're not getting on trip, but like Ali Raymond, like one of the best in this business with the Chargers now, but like she just everything they did was amazing, and it was like they had this like lovable loser persona, and it was like it just took on a mind of its own. Like whether you like the team or not, you love their content and who they were. That wouldn't work with the Pirates or with the Steelers because that's not the fan base is not going to be humorous about losing and performance like that. So it's like, again, it's knowing and understanding and learning that. And same with the Cardinals. Like you couldn't be the lovable losers with the Cardinals because if the team wasn't good, people had other things going on, just didn't care. Like they would go to Suns games, they would watch the D-backs. Like it wasn't a big deal. Where like Pittsburgh, for better or worse, our fans care like crazy, and they will let you know when you're not doing well or when you are doing well and you're still not doing well enough. Like Pittsburgh fans care. The Cardinals fans, like when they weren't good, it was like, oh, just let us know when you're good and follow along again. So it was like, there are little kind of things that you have to learn. And the only way to learn is to be a part of it. Like, there are certain things like the White Sox started doing kind of that lovable loser thing at the end of this year, and it worked great for them. If the Cubs tried to do that, they would get like roasted beyond belief or something like that. Or if like the Yankees weren't good and they were like, hey, look at us, we're funny, it wouldn't work. So like it's just one of those things. Like you have to be in it and understand, like, again, like social is like the most direct touch point with your fan base. So it's like, you can't just be tone deaf and be like, oh, well, here's a bunch of memes and it's really funny because we're losing and like other teams do it, so our fans will like it too. And it's like, I don't know if that's the case.
Yeah, and especially like I kind of want to hear a little bit about like that contrast between NFL and MLB, where like at least if you're in a remember 5-6 game losing streak, if you're on a 6 game losing streak in the NFL, it's holy shit, like we're screwed. Whereas in baseball, like you can feel better the next week and go on a 6 game winning streak, and or even within a losing season, you have lots of ups. That to still celebrate, a great diving catch, a walk-off home run, or whatever it be, a great start from a rookie. So how did you find kind of the difference of how we can kind of shift tone and get up a little bit and get fans excited, even if we're in the midst of what feels like a lost season?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, like, yeah, football. I mean, you start the season 7-0. It's the greatest thing that's ever happened to your content, and you're all over every sports channel that is talking about, like, are the Cardinals the greatest team to ever play football? And like it's amazing. But you start the season 0-4, like the sky's falling, everything's like it's the worst thing in the world. In baseball, again, for better or worse, like you get to turn the page pretty quickly. So like for the better side, like you lose by 10 runs the night before, like thank goodness you play another game in 12 hours and you can kind of, like, Paul Skeens is starting, like life is good again. But on the same note, on like kind of the better side, or for the worse side, is like, say you win a game, like say Paul Skeens throws a no-hitter, you only have 8 to 12 hours to tell that story before it's obsolete, right? Like it's, so how do you, in football, it's like you win on Sunday, you have until next Sunday to tell the story of every single thing that happened in the entire, history of that game. Like you can highlight it in every way you want. In baseball, it's like, okay, well, how do we do this quickly and effectively and like quickly? Because like as soon as the lineup goes up for the next game, no one cares what happened the night before. So it's like, that's, I think, not necessarily a blessing and a curse, but like, that's the good and the bad about the baseball schedules. You get to turn the page really quickly, but sometimes you wish you didn't have to turn the page so quickly, and it's tough.
How do you make sure that you are able to maximize those opportunities within a long MLB season? Like, are you kind of, do you identify tent poles that, okay, we're going to do something different for these events? The games are going to become monotonous if we let them over time. So let's make sure that we rise up. We're like NFL every week is basically a tent pole event now because you only get 16 or 17 of those regular season games a year. So like, how do you make sure that fans don't get into the doldrums, and how do you kind of allocate your own budget, resources, time, and team within your staff at the Pirates to make sure that you can have these moments where you can maybe break through those fans that aren't paying attention to the day to day and won't be like monitoring a Wednesday game at 3 o'clock?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, one, it's like you got to keep things fresh. Like our creative team does an amazing job. Like, we talk and plan on like every template that could possibly be imaginable. We try and make before the season starts, just so we have it, just in case something happens, because it's so like, making graphics from scratch is going to take a long time. We might not have enough time. So like, even in like, starting lineup graphic, if you see the same starting lineup graphic 162 times, by the fifth time, no one's paying attention to it. So again, our creative team's done a great job. Like, we have 5 or 6 different versions of that. And like, we'll make special versions for special weekends. And like, even just visually, like, the information's the same. Still, the 9 players plus, plus our starting pitcher, like, it's exactly like the same information, the same experience, but it's packaged differently that at least catches your eye for an extra second instead of just zipping right past it because you already know what it is. So like, that's a big part of what we do. And then it's really like you said, like, you're trying to make the consistent look unique. And so, it's about like, our photographer, our videographers, like, shooting from different angles and different games. And like, when Paul Skeens is facing Shohei Ohtani for the first time, like, we need X, Y, and Z angles so that we have everything covered. Like, when, Andrew McCutchen's going to hit his 300th home run or whatever, like, making sure that we have a plan in place of like, okay, these are the shots we want. Like, we need to make sure we get this. Like, again, like, telling those stories and celebrating those moments when they happen. But like, it's a lot more planning on the front end to then hopefully have it work out in a way that makes sense. Like, of course, like, I remember we played the Dodgers this year when Paul started against those guys and like struck out Mookie Betts, struck out Shohei, like, great first inning. Next time Shohei comes up, home run, like, crushed it to center field. So it's like, so again, if even like we were talking about turning the page, like, if we didn't get all of that, like, Paul strikes out Shohei content out before the next time Shohei came up, it became obsolete, because it's not like you're going to put like after Shohei it's a home run, you're not going to be like, Paul Skeens shut down Shohei Ohtani, because he didn't. You know what I mean? So it's like, those are also the things with like the battle within the game is like, this amazing thing happened. How fast can we get it up? Because if we're losing by the time this goes up, it doesn't matter anymore. So like, I know a lot of talking in circles, but basically it's like, I wrote about it on LinkedIn the other day, but like, don't let consistency be the enemy of creativity. So like, just because you have a plan in place and your brand is set and you know what content's going out, like, celebrate wins in different ways, like, use content in different ways, post content in different places, and like, make the experience unique and keep people guessing, because as soon as they know what to expect from you, like, you're done. Like, they're over it. Like, don't worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, you can treat the routine and monotony as a feature or as a bug. Treat it as a feature. Like, the fact that you know that there's going to be batting practice every day. Let's try to shoot it from this angle this time, or let's like you do it from the outfield. Like, lean into that, and the opportunities to succeed, opportunities every day can be an experiment. And so I love that, taking that mindset into it. When you're looking at something like a Paul Skeens debut or a McCutchen milestone home run, are a lot of those conversations happening and preparation happening before the season, and or is there a lot of sort of happening where you have to pivot a little bit? Like, hey, we're looking at our game notes, and it looks like whatever Jared Jones, if he wins the next start, he's going to set a record for the best record for a rookie starter. Like, how do you kind of balance those two things, and how much preparation is done before the season, and kind of anticipating what may come?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little from column A, a little from column B. Like we plan for what we can so that, when things go crazy and everything hits the fan, like you can react and figure it out. So like, yeah, I mean, you knew that Paul was going to debut at some point during the season. So we started talking about like, what would that look like? What's the content that we want from it? Like we did, luckily enough, like the year before Paul came up, like I think 7 or 8 of our top 10 prospects all came up and debuted in the 2023 season. So it was like we had the book kind of like, here's how we did debuts, and so it was like, then it was really like, my first year we had O'Neal Cruz debuted in 22, and then 23 was like Henry Davis and Nick Gonzalez, and I'm trying to think, everybody was like, it was basically like we had so many guys debut, and it was like, okay, well, where does when Paul debuts, or when Jared debuts, or when person X debuts, where do they fall into kind of the zeitgeist of like our players and who have been called up in the past? And so like you then try and figure out like, well, then do we need to crank it up a notch and do even more? Or do we crank it down a notch and do a little bit, like just keep it kind of normal? And so it's like you have those discussions, but then it's really like, once not necessarily the time frame, because we didn't even really know the time frame until pretty close to it. But you kind of, like I said, you kind of talk about it and make sure that you have a general plan. And then, 3 months later, when it finally happens, it's like, oh, well, I came up with 3 other things. Let's do these instead. So it's like, it works in kind of both ways. And then again, like you said, like we didn't even know Jared was going to be on the major league roster before basically spring training last year. And then it was like, okay, now we have a whole nother angle of like a young guy that we want to highlight. And how do we do that? And so it's like, you plan for what you can, and then, you react to everything else.
And what's kind of going on in your head when you have a Skeens debut coming, or even once he hits and you know that now every time Skeens starts, it's like a national story. Like, what are the things that you are trying to strategize around? Is it like, how do we drive the most engagement, have the biggest reach, or how do we reach new casual fans? How do we build up our database and do a sweepstakes for a signed Skeens ball or RT to post or whatever? Like, what are those kind of strategic levers that you have in mind, and how you're thinking about what does maximizing success look like for these opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, I think like it's a little bit of everything. And I mean, we have a great team across the board in kind of our marketing and fan experience department here. And like, work with a lot of great people where, we're all talking about that stuff and trying to figure it out. And, the goal is to have every seat in this ballpark filled as often as we can. So how do we do that? How do we pull, like you said, every lever to make sure that happens? So it's, whether it's Paul, whether it's Kutch or O'Neal or, Brian Reynolds or Mitch Kelly, like whatever it is, like we want to make sure that we're telling stories properly and making people excited about being in this ballpark. So like, that's really where, we're working with all of the other teams across, our kind of department of just like, how do we do that collectively instead of it being like, well, we're going to try and pull this lever, but you guys pull this lever and you guys pull this. It's like, well, let's all pull these levers together, but consistently and cohesively to make sure that it has the biggest impact.
Yeah, no, totally makes sense. Is there any sense, especially with all these rookies debuting? I mean, my head's like just spinning of thinking about all those lists of rookies that you named off and several exciting prospects, where like, is it on you guys to have fans as excited as possible about every single rookie and have them thinking that Henry Davis is going to be the next, Jason Kendall or Starwell catcher or whatever, or this guy's going to be the best ever? Or is there any like, hey, like we want this guy to succeed, but don't necessarily like oversell expectations, or don't put him out there too much because if he fails, like we don't want him to have to deal with that smoke or that press, or the GM doesn't want you to really push this as much, or is that not really a thinking point? And your job is just to maximize the excitement in the eyeballs.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's a little bit of all of that. Like for us, I mean, so we have accounts that we manage called Young Bucks, and so basically what those accounts are for is like we want people to know who our prospects are. before they get here. So it's like we are basically building that excitement of like, you could see, like, you look at our accounts from last year, like you could see Bubba Chandler and his highlights and his stats and all the amazing things he's doing, so that when it gets to time where it's like Bubba Chandler's coming to Pittsburgh, you kind of already know who he is and what he's done. And like, you're kind of invested in his development, if that makes sense. So like, that's really what those accounts are for, is like, we want you to know whether it's, this kid who's our 23rd ranked prospect in, single A in Bradenton. You never know, that kid could be our starting right fielder in 3 years. And like, you could see his journey and understand who he is and be excited when he gets here. And, like Andy Rodriguez is a great example where it's like he missed last year and was hurt, but like, he rose our ranks so fast where it was like he was that kid in Bradenton, and then he's at Greensboro, then he's in Altoona, then he's in Indy, and it's like he's going to be here soon. People need to be excited about him. So it's like trying to tell those stories on the front end it kind of does the legwork for you. It's so that then it's like Henry Davis is going to debut, Andy Rodriguez, Quinn Priester was one that last year. Like, all these guys are going to debut, but you already know who they are because we've gone to Indy and done pieces on them. We've gone to Altoona and done pieces on, like, who these guys are because we're excited about them. You should be excited about them too. And then when they're here, it's really like, they're here. Here's them meeting, talking to Shelty. Here's them, in the clubhouse, seeing their jersey for the first time, walking on their field. So it's more of like, we're not necessarily selling like, here's the savior of the franchise. It's just like, here's this young kid who's living out his dream, and you get to be a part of it and follow along.
I like that. Yeah, I was remembering myself of like when O'Neal Cruz first came up, and everyone was like, he's going to be the next big thing, and he was off the bat. He did incredible things every night. He threw the ball from shortstop like 120 miles per hour, whatever you want to say. And then he kind of settled in, and maybe wasn't this overnight phenom from day one, but you still like you manage that a little bit, and part of that's just the me as a third party observer, not an everyday Pirates fan, and also just the national media will run things as well. But it's just some me a little bit.
Well, yeah, and I mean, like, and like you said, like, these kids face enough pressure. Like, I couldn't imagine being 22 years old and it's like, okay, well, now you're supposed to be the savior of this franchise. It's like that's not a pressure that I want to put on anyone with any of the content we put out. I want to be like, our job is to, like I said, it's to celebrate this amazing accomplishment in this young man's life and make it so that like it's something that he can remember, and like the general population of our fan base can remember, for good or for bad. Like, this was a key moment. And like, even looking back a couple of years, like Drew Maggi was like my age, finally made his debut, and like, again, like, not saying that Drew Maggi is the greatest baseball player that's ever lived, but like treating his debut appropriately of like, this dude, like, he achieved his dream and he got to experience this, and we want to showcase that to the world. Not really putting any extra pressure on it, just being there to basically share and celebrate with him of like we're happy that you had to experience it, and here are the amazing memories that you've given our fan base.
Yeah, that's one of the best like human stories to come through MLB the last few years. A couple words left here with Zach Galia, director of social media and content strategy for the Pittsburgh Pirates. It was something we didn't touch on yet that I don't want to make sure we discuss a little bit. Is you alluded to earlier when we were talking about your various career stops, and how you kind of took on these like director of digital strategy roles and director of content, especially with the Cardinals, and like, what was it like kind of. I think everyone that works in social kind of has a feel for a lot of these other platforms, and digital becomes this large umbrella all of a sudden. But digital is more than social platforms. It's mobile, it's web, it's email, oftentimes it's CRM. So like, how did you kind of start to learn, and what was your own like experience, both in terms of your ambitions and what you wanted to step into, and also what it was like kind of figuring out, okay, this is what an app strategy looks like, this is what this strategy looks like, and it's different or similar in some ways to social.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much like it's coming at things like with a different viewpoint, right? Like, I was close with the guy who ran, the website and ran the app with the Steelers, but it's not like it was not my world. It wasn't what I was trying to do. But then, like, it being a challenge, a new challenge. Like, I love learning. I love kind of, expanding my horizons and figuring things out. But it's if you can promote things on social, like those skills are very transferable. Like social media becomes like those are the channels and the outlets for, you know, your viewpoint, your strategy, and kind of your take on whatever the thing is, whether it's game coverage or, selling tickets or whatever. And social media is just, an outlet for that. So like learning about the app and being like, okay, well, how do people use the app? What do they need it for? Like what it like, and one thing I always say is like, you need to, you need to know where you've been and to figure out where you're going. So then dig into like, what are people using our app for in Arizona and how can we make it better? And like, how can we readjust and move things around so it's easier to find stuff and like make the user experience better. And so that people spend more time on it, because the last thing you want is some confusing ass app that no one can figure out. Like no one's going to spend time no matter how much work you put on it. So like little things like that, like personal experience, like using apps and things like that. And then, learning, like digging in of like, how can we, push notifications were a big thing that we were digging into with the Cardinals of like, how can we segment our fans and what are the segments that we want to push people to? And like, what are people going to sign up for? And then what content do we deliver to them and how do we do it? And so like, again, it's very much like all the skills of like, hey, I'm going to build a strategy for Facebook. It works, insert platform X here. Granted, like I don't have all the knowledge in the world and I'm not this, magician of a marketer by any means, but it's like I have enough confidence in myself to know that like we'll figure it out. Like I think like you put a bunch of bright people in the same room with different experiences, no matter what the challenge is, you're going to figure it out. It may not work the first time, it may not work the second time, but you'll get there. So it's just, again, like failure is just part of the journey. It's not you either succeed or you fail, and those are the only two options. It's at the end of the day, like I forget what, I think it was on TikTok maybe, but there's some, some leadership guru or whatever it is, or, whatever their title was, but it was like, what if I told you that like you needed to fail 30 times to get to success? You would probably rip through those failures as quickly as you could so that you knew that after failure number 29, you're there. So it's like, instead of thinking like as failures is like, man, we missed the mark, like we need to start over. It's like, well, no, that's one of the failures you needed to take before you get to that successful point. So it's like, again, this is probably a tangent that we don't need to get into, but like that's a big thing for me is like a quote I love is like, don't be afraid to suck at something new today. Like, yeah. There's no way you're going to be good at everything. There's no way that you're never going to know everything, especially in social. Like I still don't know everything. I've been doing this for over a decade, but like, it's okay to fail. It's okay to not know everything. Like that's why you other people to rely on and talk to, and, people like yourself to reach out and pick their brains, or, some of my friends in the industry is like, how do you guys do this? Like, I can't figure this out. And slowly but surely you'll get there. But like, it's one of those things, like failure is such a scary word, and it's something that I've feared for a very long time, but it's like, it's just part of it. Like there's no one in this industry or in the world that can be like, no, I've never failed. Like I've been good since birth. So it's not how it works.
No, it's almost like if you don't suck at something, if you haven't failed, or like one of the things that I like to ask too is like, what like deep seated belief that did you have your mind changed about recently? Because if you're not seeking these failures, if you're not seeking these mind changing things, then you're in a bubble. You're not challenging yourself. Like you should be like, if you're running to those things that are intimidating to you, that you don't feel comfortable with, that you feel like you might fail at, because that's how you grow. So I love that mindset. And I feel like maybe that social media strategy is almost like this blanket term. I think the way you were kind of leading into this a little bit is that, it's ultimately, there is no like blanket social media strategy. It's like, okay, I have to understand Facebook, I have to understand YouTube, I have to understand Twitter, I have to understand app, I have to understand website. These are all channels to engage fans that have different audiences, different, sometimes KPIs, different things that you can do to move the needle, different things that work, certainly, different content strategies. And so I think it's sort of that, like the idea of having a social media expert is kind of foolhardy, because you might think you're an expert, but then TikTok comes around and you're like, okay, well, crap, the stuff that I thought worked on, YouTube all these years doesn't work on TikTok, or vice versa, or something along those lines. So
yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, right? Like you're never like if your plan is to do the same thing on every platform, you're going to be okay on one of those platforms, but you're going to fail on the other ones. You know what I mean? Like it's so when you're creating content, you're creating these strategies, like you're creating these strategies to engage with your fans, but you also want to, you want to create content that the platforms value as well. Is like, there was a point a couple of years ago where it was like Instagram's pushing nothing but reels. Okay, we're going to do reels like crazy because that's what the platform wants you to push. Then, at some point last year, it was like, no, 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 carousels are where it's at now. Carousel is where it's at, and that's what we're going to do. So it's like, if you're not bringing in what the platforms value into your strategy, you're going to miss the mark at in some form or fashion. And then like, it's also hard for, platforms like Threads or Blue Sky, where it's like, I don't know that they know what they want on that platform yet. So how are we supposed to figure it out? So it's like, it's kind of like this guessing game of like, we're figuring out while they're figuring it out. And then when they figure it out, we are kind of closer to where we want to be. And we kind of slide over to their lane to push our content. So like, it's, again, another kind of tangent, but it's like everyone always asks, if TikTok goes away, like, what's next? Like, what do you do? And it's like, well, I don't know. Like, it's not going to be up to the Pirates or Nike or, the Steelers as to where all of the audience from TikTok goes. The audience that was on TikTok is going to go somewhere, and we're going to have to meet them where they are and give them the experience that they're looking for, So it's like, if you think that this is just like a one-way street of like, I'm going to write this strategy down on paper and it's going to work, it's not. Like, you have to know what the platform's looking for. You have to know what your fans are looking for, and you kind of meet everyone in the middle.
When it comes to like defining success too, like how do you think about balancing the data and the non-data, I guess, for lack of a better term, like the art and the science? Like in some ways, like you want to lean into what the platforms are favoring because you want to drive big numbers and you want to drive what feels like success. But sometimes if you lean too hard into that, it's like you start to just play the game and it's not really accomplishing the true goals that you have. Like, what's that balance been like for you over your career, I guess, and learnings insights you picked up along the way?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like the goal on socials, like there are multiple, but like when you're just talking about content specifically, it's like, it's the user experience, right? Like, it's a battle for every 4 seconds. Like, you want to give someone what they're looking for on the platform that they're on, right? Like, no one is going to Twitter to then see a link to drive them to Facebook, that then it's like half the video is there, but then some of it's on YouTube. It's like if I want to go to YouTube, I'll be on YouTube and I'll see it there. So it's like, you have to, again, meet people where they are. But again, like, keeping your business goals in mind and what you're trying to achieve, but just putting it in the packages and in the places that people are going to see it more clearly. So like, no matter what the goal is, you're still not necessarily leaning into like whatever Instagram's goal is now my goal. It's like, now I know what Instagram's goal is. So I can kind of tweak our strategy to make sure that more people see what my goal and our goals as an organization are.
Totally. Yeah. The objective of this game, of this whole area, is not to win the internet. It's not to win social. There's no, like, you have to win on whatever winning means for you. And the person that goes the most viral is not necessarily winning at the game that their business is trying to play.
And like, I mean, like, it's, hey, here's like 3 tricks that we're going to triple our, web traffic link clicks. And it's just kind of like this, inside baseball trick that will, with the app and with it, like, who cares if you're, the first in the NFL or Major League Baseball and link clicks if you're not achieving all of the other goals, right? Like, so there's always little tricks and things that you could do that inflate whatever stat it might be. But like, if the goal at the end of the day is to sell the most tickets possible, like, I need to figure out the best way I can support that goal on social media and on every platform that falls under my purview and make it happen.
Yeah, I mean, I heard recently David Brickley of STN Digital, super great guy, and he has his own podcast, Business of Social, and he mentioned how like they worked with one client who at the end of the season their follower count was like flat or maybe went down even, but they were happy because they grew or they changed their demos. So now they had like more of a younger fan base that was following them, or more of a female fan base. So like you don't like, understand what you're trying to accomplish, and it's not always just the highest number. If it's not really fitting into what your objectives are. So I love that.
That's
Well,
it, man. Yeah, I mean, there's only so many Pirates fans in this world, and there's so many people who don't care about baseball that I can try and convert to Pirates fans. But like at the end of the day, like growth at some point is going to plateau. Like it always will, no matter what platform it is. Like TikTok grew like crazy. It's still growing pretty well, but it's like it's slowing down. Like Twitter slowed down. Instagram's still crazy, but it's slowing. Like there's only so many humans in the world that you can keep growing. So it's like you said, like what define what's important to you and go after that goal. Don't go after the goal that everyone thinks is important.
yeah, love that. Oh, Zach, we need to get to our extra inning segment, but I want to make sure to end on this, and because you've always been so articulate and thoughtful about it, and you and I talked offline about this a little bit too, and then that is just sort of being able to grow up in this industry and be able to have some semblance of a work-life balance. You mentioned you have kids. You mentioned how it's what it's like trying to balance, I guess, just work life within a 162 game schedule in Major League Baseball, within a 24/7 lifestyle with the NFL. Like, how have you found it as you've gotten older, as you become a leader of people as well in your position? How you make sure that they prioritize their mental health? Like, how have you seen that kind of change and evolve in a good way, and become a leader yourself?
I mean, I think it's, everyone always talks about boundaries and, work-life balance, and like boundaries are, they're everything, but like the boundaries need to come from you. Like I always tell, my team, and it's something my dad always told me, like there's only one person who can look out for you 100% of the time, and it's you. And so you need to put your priorities in order of like, this is number one, this is number two, this is number three, so that you can put those guardrails and those boundaries in place and know like, no, I'm not going to sacrifice, X for Y, because that's not how my priorities are laid out. Or like, it's not, if you're going at these boundaries and this work-life balance, like casually of like, I'll figure it out. You won't, I promise. It's not like work will consume you. There's always going to be so much to do and so little time, but like it's something, when I was, in this early on, it was like I worked until someone told me to stop, and no one told me to stop. So you just worked and you worked and you worked, and it was just, this was your whole identity. And I was Zach, the Steelers social media guy. And it's like, but that's not, then you go home and it's like, well, what do I do? I might as well get my computer open and start working again, because that's who I am. And so it's like, again, a long roundabout way of saying it's like, it helps when you work in a really great organization. Like I said this offline, but like the Pirates have been the greatest stop that I've had in my career, because they value that stuff, and they value, making sure that I have enough time to spend with my family, and making sure that, I'm not burnt out by June, and I have kind of the freedom to do things the way I need to do them to make sure that I'm okay. And so that helps, but it's also like, even if the Pirates were just like, we're good with however you want to do it, but I don't have a plan for my own mental health, like they're not going to make one for me. Right. So it's like, the best advice I can give is like, put your priorities in order. Like, it's, your family or your physical health or what hiking, whatever it is like, put the priorities in the order that you value the most, and stick to them, and make those boundaries that kind of keep you within those priorities, and it'll help like crazy. But like, it's, it's also a blessing being in this role where it's like, I've been in places where, you're overworked and, your mental health is not great. It's really tough going to work. And, that's not anything against any of the places that I've worked in the past. It's just like, I'm kind of part of the first generation, and yourself included, like that have done this career path, right? Like it's crazy to think that, I've been doing it for 12 years, but like social kind of was just becoming a thing when I started doing it. And now it's like a full industry. So it's nice to be able to look at my team that are, the age that I was when I was first getting, and like help them put these guardrails in place, and help them with things that I already went through, to be like, you don't have to do that. Like, go home, get some rest. Like we can spread this stuff. Like it's nice to be able to help with those guardrails and help with those, the priorities. But like, I can only help so much, right? Like I said, if you don't know what's important to you and you don't know the boundaries you want to put in place, like I can't make them for you. So it's like I can help you enforce them, but they have to come from within. They have to come from you to start.
Very well said. Yeah, I mean, you can hide the key to the training facility for the player who wants to never leave, but they have to make a decision that there's having a life outside of your job is important too. And I'm just grateful that we have leaders like you who are in this game now, or making sure that the next generations are able to have an actual work-life balance. They won't burn out in their 20s. Oh man, like so many of us did. All right, Zach, we're into our shareable stat. This is just so good. I get to talk to you all day. Here's a simple shareable stat. We'll have some more fun with you in the extra innings right after that. And here we go. Tremendous stuff from Zach Galia, Director of Social Media and Content Strategy for the Pittsburgh Pirates. You can tell why he's so good at what he does. He thinks about these things. We talked about leadership. We talked about crossing over between social and digital and content strategy overall, about goals, about preparation, about being reactive, about telling stories, about building brand, about developing fans, about accomplishing objectives. Such good stuff from Zach. And stick around because we're going to have more fun with him in our extra innings segment. Lots more good stories and insights there. So I encourage you to stick around for that. But first, this episode's shareable stat. And this episode's shareable stat comes from the recent Australian Open. It's a little bit of a non-traditional shareable stat. The one I'm going to share with you is 183,000. That's how many views there were for one of many of these alternative live animated broadcasts that the Australian Open did on YouTube. You may have heard about this story. Due to broadcast rights, the Australian Open was able to put on YouTube a fully live, true to life animation of live matches going on. They did this for every single match, it seems like, where you saw very realistic looking, realistic meaning they were trying to match the way they look and their color, their dress and all that, their movements as well. Matches in action between the tennis players competing in the Australian Open. Really cool to see. Really good use of real-time data and a cool way to engage fans. Now, the reason I share with you this shareable stat is not to say that you should go and create your own live animation version of games. It's not an easy thing to do technologically. Maybe it will be in the near future with AI and increased efficiencies and capabilities there. But certainly an interesting way to look at how different ways you can engage fans around live sports events. They were getting tens of thousands of views. Of course, this one got 183,000 views. That was a match between a Jessica Pegula match, the well-known American tennis player, one of her early round matches, which she won to advance in the Australian Open. And why is it interesting? Again, not just because not everyone will have access to watch the Australian Open live, but also a way to really congregate with other fans who are watching with you and to engage in those live chats, which are so good on YouTube, among other places, Twitch as well. Right now, where are fans going to engage during those live events? It used to be all about Twitter, and for many fans, it still is. But for a lot of fans, they are coming away from Twitter. Twitter is becoming a little bit more diluted, of course, in the Elon Musk era as things have evolved there. Some fans are following along with, in the Instagram comments. There's a lot of community being developed there. Some teams are experimenting with Discord, with other places. They're engaging in the comments on TikTok, of course, as well. Where do you want fans to be able to have that truly live interactive experience? And YouTube might be a place to do so. How can you engage fans with whatever content you can put out there on YouTube? Maybe it's just some organizations, some teams in the college space in particular, I've seen this, just put a straight up live scoreboard on YouTube and give their fans a place to engage in that chat. We've seen, of course, live streams with various camera angles and whatnot on TikTok, on Instagram, on Twitter as well. And there's another place where fans can go and congregate and chat. We've seen the Instagram comment section become really active when fans are particularly, energized around a given comments or a given a development in a game or story. So really interesting to think about just where can you start to centralize conversations with fans and drive and develop that community during live games. Again, you don't necessarily do it with these crazy cool animations that the Australian Open did, but I do encourage you to check those out because they are a really cool display of technology in action. But to start to think about how you can truly allow your fans to engage, not just with your own accounts, but with each other. Maybe it's in your app, but it might be a little bit harder than others. Maybe it is on a YouTube stream. Maybe it's a stream elsewhere. Maybe it's a stream on Twitch or on TikTok or wherever else it might be. start to experiment with how you can truly centralize and encourage fans to interact and engage with each other. All right, that's the share with that. Again, 183,000 views of just one example of many. Again, this was the Jessica Pegula match. You can look back on, go to the Australian Open on YouTube, look at their live videos that they've had over the course of this year's tournament, and you will see great examples here and very lively chats with fans engaging, interacting with each other during these matches. All right, that's the Civil Share with that. More importantly, though, stick around because lots more good stuff coming from Zach Galia of the Pittsburgh Pirates. Right back here, so shareable stat, and I'm joined once again by Zach Galia. He is Director of Social Media and Content Strategy for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Zach, you kicked ass in your interview. Are you now ready to play some extra innings?
I'll do it.
All right, we won't have a ghost runner, so it won't be that fast, but it'll still be some pretty quick movement here. So first, number one for you, I'm going to surprise you with this question. Your favorite athletes growing up? Who were those top guys or top gals that you looked up to growing up?
Ooh, I mean, Mario Lemieux with the Penguins was a big one. Everything, like, one of my favorite athletes of all time is Muhammad Ali. Just like I've never been kind of like the super overly confident person. And so him being the one that, like, and granted, he predates me, but I like watched all his fights and stuff on ESPN Classic. But like him being able to like talk his talk and back it up every single time, like it captivated me. Of just like, this dude has so much confidence. I would love to have 8% of his confidence, and it would be amazing. I loved Ken Griffey Jr. was another one.
There we go.
Mimic his batting stance all the time, wear my hat backwards. But like, hockey was my sport growing up. So I loved Mario. I loved his name is Darius Kasparaitis, and he's kind of a deep pull, but I had kind of the same long haircut as him, and like I was about his size, and I loved that he just ran around and hit people like crazy, and that's kind of how I modeled my game, was him, where it was like, oh, this little guy can do it, like why can't I do it? So but yeah, like those are kind of my guys, and I loved like Greg Lloyd, Kevin Green, like the guys coming off the edge for the Steelers in the 90s. More modern guys, like I love Koch, I love O'Neill and Paul, and a lot of the guys on our team, and Sidney Crosby, Austin Matthews, Devin Booker, Caitlin Clark, Trinity Rodman, like list goes on and on. Like, sports is in such a good place now. Like it's amazing to watch, from NWSL all the way through Major League Baseball. Like it's been awesome.
Oh yeah, no, there's an athlete for everyone to look up to that is like them, which is a great place to be. Yeah, I will say too, I think my personal opinion is that Mario Lemieux was the most skilled hockey player of all time. You may have Gretzky, you might have the best in terms of IQ and not getting, and obviously Lemieux had his illness as well and battled his injuries. But when he was at in their prime, healthy, no one, you can't convince me anyone was more skilled than Lemieux. And I think a lot of hockey players would agree with that.
Well, I mean, this is probably a very Pittsburgh take, but I will always stand on this take, is that if Mario Lemieux played as many games and as long as Wayne Gretzky, he would have broken all of Wayne Gretzky's records.
Hell yeah.
That was my guy.
We will take it. Number two, tell me, I like this question a lot, and I love to, that you are pretty thoughtful about like helping the next generation. So tell me the number one tip you give to someone who's aspiring to work in sports and digital and social.
Ooh, all right. I'll try and keep this as brief as possible because I'm very long-winded when it comes to this stuff. But I mean, one, like, find what you love, find what you're good at, and learn everything you can about it. Like social, when I was getting into the industry, was very much just like, oh, you can do everything? Great. Like, we need someone who can do everything. But now everyone has a team that does a little bit of everything. So find your lane, find what you enjoy. Like, is it photography? Is it video production? Is it copywriting? Is it analytics? Like, whatever it is, find that and dig into it and become an expert and put in your, whatever it is, 10,000 hours or whatever. But like, find your thing and go for it. I would say next thing would be like, no opportunity is too small. Like I said, I started NASCAR, like whether you start in minor league baseball or whatever it is, like it's a step, like whatever gets your foot in the door is the door you should go through. And as long as whatever that step is closer to where you want to be, it's a good step. And so like, and it kind of runs into my third point is just like be open to relocating and going anywhere. Because if you want to work in sports, there are jobs out there. If you want to work in sports in CX, there are way less jobs out there. So like, I've been blessed to magically, like I was in Pittsburgh. I moved 3,000 miles away to Phoenix to move 3,000 miles back to Pittsburgh in 3 years. Like there are jobs out there in every league across the globe and a lot of places to see and a lot of things to learn. Like, don't pigeonhole yourself to like, I want to live in Colorado. Well, maybe there's 5 teams there you can work for. Why not open it up a little bit? So those are really my 3 big things. And then from like a applying application standpoint, the best trick I can give is like, when you look at a job description, that is literally the person hiring that job is telling you exactly the perfect person for the job that they want. So use that to your advantage and write your resume to reflect that you can do all of the things on that sheet, and even use the same terminology and the same words because, subconsciously that connects with the hiring manager. And so like, I understand the time commitment that it takes of like making a custom resume and a custom cover letter for every opportunity. And it's tough, but that's sometimes what it takes to cut through the noise. Like if you're just, blasting out the same resume and cover letter to 100 different jobs, like why not take the time and find the 5 jobs that you want the most and do something very specific for those jobs? So, I mean, that's really like, those are the biggest ones I got.
All very well said. I +1 to everything. Love it. Number 3 for you, Zach. You alluded to this before, but I'm gonna ask you anyway. Tell me a scouting report of Zach Galia, the hockey player. Like who was your dream NHL company when you were coming up, and also like who's the player now that may resemble you if you had been 10x better or reached your upper potential.
Oh man, I mean, scouting report on me. It was probably, like I said, Darius Kasparidis was a guy I modeled my game after for a while. I feel like in my earlier days, I was probably a little bit more offensive than him. And I always loved watching Chris Letang play. But I was never that skilled by any means. So like, oh man, who's the big goon for the Rangers?
Rampy.
Rampy. Yeah. So the things that he does, like that in my later days in hockey, that's how I played, except for I was, 9 inches shorter than he is. So like, always trying to get under people's skin and cause trouble and block shots and hit people and fight. But like, I mean, if there's a comp to who I think I could have been, it's like, I mean, pick any 6th or 7th defenseman out there that you barely ever recognize because they get 4 points a season and have 60 or 70 penalty minutes, and they're +10, and that would be kind of my comp, I think.
Hey, I can speak from experience. Oftentimes those guys are the coolest and the best sound bites as well. I mean, look at Paul Bissonnette, of course, and where he's gone. That was him when he was in the NHL. So I love that. Now I was already picturing before when you talked about the long hair. I'm already picturing that salad, that sweet salad, that mullet that you must have been rocking at some point.
Oh yeah. Okay, that's good.
Number 4, tell me the most viral piece of content from each of your 3 teams: Steelers, Cardinals, Pirates.
Well, I honestly, I want to say like each one of them is probably a text tweet of some sort. I mean, with the Pirates, like the most recent thing is like the offer that we gave to the Paul Skeens like debut patch card and all that stuff. And again, like I can't take any credit for that. Like I was the one that pushed send, but there were so many people that brought that to light and developed that like me just pushing send was probably it. But like more recent, well, not more recently, but like we had a post, it was a text tweet, like we were playing the Mets, I think it was in July, and we hit a ton of home runs and literally ran out of fireworks at the ballpark. So I tweeted that out and it went crazy, of course. So that was a big one there. With the Steelers, I always liked to prep copy before games because you had like, let's say, a week in between. So I always like to have little goofy things ready to go. And so Ariana Grande's one album came out, and we were playing the Panthers on Thursday Night Football. And so it was like 5 minutes left in the game, and we were beating them by like 35 points. And I just wrote "Thank you next," like Ariana Grande did, and she ended up like quote tweeting it and pushing it out, and like it just went berserk. But that again, I had like a stupid little text tweet, and then I mean, probably with the Cardinals, and again, I can't really take credit for this because it wasn't my idea, but like we, whenever we lost, we didn't put the final score out. And the one year that we started the season 7-0, we lost to the Packers on Thursday Night Football. We didn't put the score up. Nobody said anything. Then we ended up losing like a couple weeks later to the Lions, who were really bad, and we didn't put it up. And that's when everyone jumped in, and like Barstool and Big Cat, it was this huge thing that everyone was so mad, and post the score, you cowards. I still have DMs on my personal account of people yelling at me to post the score. But like, so finally, my boss at the time, Tim Delaney, who's one of the best dudes in this game, but he came up with the idea of doing like what's the movie? It's the Christmas movie where they're Love Actually, and they're holding the signs in front and like just like and they're reading it. So he had the idea of doing that because it was around Christmas time, of our mascot holding signs like basically saying like Christmas is, or the holidays are a time for forgiveness, and basically like went through and made this video of like, and then he holds up a sign that says the final score and like keeps going through it. And so again, it wasn't my idea. I ended up hitting set on the post, and it was like, again, one of the biggest things we ever did. But it's like, it's so funny, the things that get, that picked up, and the best things that you could do are never the things that you plan, over and over again. I'm like Antonio Brown stretching the ball across the goal line on Christmas Day to beat the Ravens. DeAndre Hopkins Hail Mary in 2020 against the Bills, like stuff like that, where it's like you're reacting to things that are happening. But very rarely is it like a campaign or piece of content that you're like, oh, this is going to do it. It's just some reactionary thing that ends up working out.
I mean, but it all just ladders back up to like it. Some of this is baked in intuition and developing those instincts and developing be able to see what's going to work. And it's like the old anecdote of like Picasso drew a sketch on a napkin for somebody and charged the woman like whatever. So I was going to charge you $10,000, and he said, "What? It took you 2 seconds to do that." He's like, "No, it took me 20 years to do that," or whatever it was. So it's all these experiences have combined to give you the opportunity and your colleagues as well to understand what's going to work and to capitalize. So don't sell yourself short. That's something that can happen in the moment. It might take 2 seconds to come up with it, but it's taken 15 years to develop the skills to come up with it.
That's fair.
All right, number 5 for you here. This is gonna be a fun one. Tell me your favorite athlete you've gotten to work with at each of those 3 teams: Bucks, Buccos, Pirates, or Steelers, Pirates, and Cardinals. Favorite athlete you got to work with?
Steelers, it would have to be. I have 3 guys that were. I have a bunch of guys. They're amazing, but like Cam Hayward is my guy. I love that dude. He would be my favorite football player for all time. Just the nicest guy. Kelvin Beachum, he would be one that fits for the Pirates or for the Steelers and the Cardinals because I got to work with him both places. Another one of just like the genuinely best human beings. James Conner again would be Steelers and Cardinals. Got to work with him in both places. Who else with the Steelers? I love Marquise Pouncey. Was one of my guys where like he literally would do nothing that I asked, not a single thing. But he was just the funniest, like nicest dude. Like we always had good conversations, and he would always be like, "Man, how many times are you gonna ask me to do something?" I was like, "Until you say that you will." And he's like, "Well, I'll keep trying." And so like he was just someone I like. He was just a great dude, and Le'Veon Bell was one that was really great to work with. Antonio Brown was a really nice guy and was good to work with too. The Cardinals, another one like Chandler Jones was a great dude when I was there. One of my all-time favorite guys is Dennis Gardeck, he was like a D2 free agent that ended up like I think he had an injury this year, but he was one of the top pass rushers on the Cardinals and was always a special teams captain. But he was like another guy who just like talked to you like you were one of the guys, and we did a bunch of content together, and was just a really, really, really good guy. Um, and then with the Pirates, I mean, like they're all so just down to earth and like so calm and chill and nice guy. I mean, trying to think if I could pick anyone specifically. I mean, Andy Rodriguez is like he's an absolute character. Um, Such a good kid and a nice kid, brings such a good energy. Josh Palacios is another one who is just like they're just like they bring the best energy possible. Uh, but they're all such good, like Bednar and Brian Reynolds and Mitch Keller and like McKee and Kutch and Paul and like they're all like, I don't know that I could sell anyone short, but like it's such a good group of guys here that like it's exciting to be a part of it.
Great. Oh, you got to come across a lot of good people throughout your career, and it sounds like you're in a really good spot there with the Pirates and that squad. Next up for you, Zach, tell me your number one kind of like guiding principle or mantra. Like, what's kind of in your head that helps guide social media strategy for you in sports? Like, meant to be open ended. Just like what's sort of that mantra in your head that is kind of guiding a lot of things along the way.
Biggest thing I always say is if everything's important, then nothing's important. So figure out again, it goes back to priorities. Figure out what is the most important thing to you and spend the most time trying to achieve it and give the other things the proper attention down the list. So again, if you're trying to achieve, like, I want to grow on every platform and I want, this to happen, it's like, not all of that is going to work. But like a high tide raises all ships. If you are achieving that goal that's at the very, very, very top, I'm sure some of your lower goals are going to keep creeping up and creeping up closer to where you want them to be too. But like, if you were going into any season saying like these 15 things are important, none of them are important because you couldn't narrow it down to one or two things.
Love that one. It's so well put, and definitely an important one to keep in mind for everything really, and for work and for not work stuff. Next up for you, this might be a tough one, but tell me the most memorable game from your career for whatever reason. It could be memorable for whatever reason. The most memorable game.
I mean, I've talked about a couple of them. Like, I'll always remember that Hall of Fame game because that was the first football game I ever covered. Like, it was a horrible game. The Hall of Fame game's the worst game in professional sports. I will stand by that. But like, I'll never forget being like getting off the bus and being on the sidelines, just having literally absolutely no clue of what I was doing. I'll never forget that. That Christmas game where AB, like the immaculate extension or whatever everyone called it, like to beat the Ravens, win the AFC North. Like, that was one I'll never forget. The Hopkins one, where at this last second Hail Mary, we beat the Bills and no one was in the stadium, and it was the weirdest thing ever. I like the crazy game. I think it was a wild card game in Cincinnati when I was with the Steelers where we were losing, and then Shazier punches the ball out with like 2 minutes left, and then Vontaze Burfict gets a penalty, and then Pac-Man Jones pushes one of our coaches, and that gets us closer. And like, we end up kicking a field goal, thought we were going to lose, and ended up winning the game somehow. Like, it was the weirdest game of all time.
Wow.
And then like one that I will truly never forget is like opening day, like the home opener here in Pittsburgh when Kutch came back, and like the standing ovation, and like basically like this dude who was like a big part of like not my childhood, but like as a young adult, he was like, he's the guy with the Pirates. Like, that was like, I had a Kutch jersey before I even worked here, and like seeing him come back and getting to be a part of that, and then like seeing him like walk out and tip his cap to the fans and everyone go like, I will never forget that. Never forget that.
Some great ones there. And I will tell you that the next game that's going to become the most memorable in your career is going to be when the Pirates clinch a playoff spot, whenever that comes. I mean, hopefully this coming season, maybe not, we'll see, but it'll happen. It will happen during your tenure. And that'll be one. Number 8, time for our food questions. Zach, let's ask for food questions. So if I come out there to Pittsburgh and we go and get a meal, what is the best meal to get in Pittsburgh and where to get it?
Oh, that's tough. I love food. Oh man. So I would say like there's a lot of like typical Pittsburgh things, but I will say like one of my favorite things in the city is it's this little spot in the Strip District called Colangelo's. It's attached to La Prima Coffee, which has the best coffee and espresso in the city. But it's called Colangelo's, and they have pizza there, and they're called these grandma slices, where it's like these thick pieces of pizza, square sauce on them, and then like some Parmesan cheese on top. It's the best pizza I've ever had. So that's kind of my go-to. I love that spot. I mean, there's so many others. Like Strip District is my favorite place in Pittsburgh, but there's a place called Jimmy and Nino's, and they make what's called an atomic pepperoni roll. I think it's like $5, but it's like this big log of just like bread and cheese and pepperoni and like hot pepper and like fantastic. But like go to the Strip District, walk down the street, eat at like 5 different places, and they'll be happy.
You will eat good in Pittsburgh. It sure sounds like it. That sounds good to me. Down the wire here with Zach Galia of the Pittsburgh Pirates. Tell me the most impressive athlete and the most impressive athletic feat that you've seen in person. So who's someone that you've seen in person and you're like, holy crap, that is the most incredible athlete I've ever seen, and most impressive athletic feat?
Person. I mean, I'll give you 2 examples. They're both with the Steelers, and they're not anything I think that you would expect. But I remember they were doing they always call it was backs versus backers. And basically it was like in training camp for the Steelers. And it was like all the linebackers, all the running backs and tight ends would basically like the running back would line up, the linebacker would get a running start basically on the whistle, and the running back or tight end would have to block the linebacker. Well, it was Vince Williams was the middle linebacker. I think it was Xavier Grimble was one of our backup tight ends. And Vince Williams hit this dude so hard, like it sounded like a car wreck. And like I was literally 5 feet from it. And like Xavier Grimble didn't even go down. Like they just hit so hard, and he still like it was it was still one of the craziest things I've ever seen, like that close. And but I'll never forget the sound that it made when those two guys. I was like, man, I would have been dead if he would have hit me that hard. And this dude just like took it and stood up and blocked. And then there was one time I was standing on the sidelines at training camp, and Antonio Brown was talking to Coach Tomlin about like how to beat this corner. And like I'd never played football growing up. Like I've always been a Steelers fan. Like I think you think you know the game until you're around people who actually know the game. And hearing everything that he said about like if he takes a step this way, or if his foot points this way, or if his hip turns, like all these different things that were in his head of like moving his hand, and like it blew my mind that was like all the thoughts that were going in his head in like the 3 seconds in front of the DB. Like it was just, I was like, man, I don't know anything about this sport. Like this is great.
Oh man, that's mind blowing. I love that anecdote. Yeah, because we don't get it. All the details that are in their head and the split seconds they make those decisions, and every professional sport out there, it's crazy. All right, last one to end on, Zach. Tell me the lesser known Pirates player whose name all baseball fans will know by the end of next season, and also the Pirates player whose social media we should all go check out. So lesser known Pirates player who's gonna break out and we're all gonna know, and also the Pirates player with the social media we should go check out.
Oh man, those are good questions. I mean, social, like if you're not following Kutch by now, like please go follow him. Like a dude is hilarious. Like he's even outside of baseball, he's still one of my favorite follows in sports, and just always has funny things to say and great reactions to stuff. And like he's the guy. Like definitely follow him. He's fantastic. Breakout player. Oh man.
Casual fans are all going to know this name sometime during next season.
Yeah, I mean, like I want to say like one of the young guys. Like I want to say Andy Rodriguez, because he was like made his debut in 23 and then was hurt all last year, and like
It's a good one.
Like he could be one. Like love Nick Gonzalez. Like he showed some flashes last year. Josh Palacios again. Like he's one of the guys I will always go to bat for. So maybe I'll go with, I don't want to go with any of our top prospects. Oh, see, like now you're putting me in a position, like I don't want to be wrong, and then people be like, this guy doesn't know anything about baseball. Um, let's go with Leover Peguero, who was called Peggy, but he's again one of the nicest kids, like one of the best dudes. Like you just want him to succeed, and he's been so close for a couple years. So I would love for him to crack the opening day roster at second or short and have a great little season. But yeah, I mean, insert young guy X.
Yeah.
And I think like I can't wait until Bubba Chandler gets here. I don't know if it'll be this year or not or whenever, but like those young guys that we've been building and getting to know, like it's going to be great to see them kind of develop. And I got like one other guy I would say is Kyle Nicholas. So he's right-handed pitcher out of the bullpen. He's pretty amazing. So, but yeah, I mean, insert, young player X, and I'm definitely gonna be rooting for all these guys.
Lots of guys with lots of upside. One of them will break out, so you're bound to be right about at least one of them.
Yeah. I wanted to say like 14 or 15 guys, so hopefully I'm right in one regard. But hopefully they all have a solid season. It'd be great to see.
All right, Zach, you rounded the bases. You scored a walk-off win for the Buccos for you. Now your chance to take over the podcast. Tell us your social media all-star follow. It can be anyone out there, any platform, or even a blog or a podcast, whatever you like. Tell us who they are and why they're following.
Oh man, that's a great question. I mean, I'm going to go with two because they've both been such a huge help in my career. But Andy Perelman, she has her own startup company and agency now. But I've worked with her for a very long time. She's one of the best people in this industry and genuinely cares about the things that she's doing and the companies that she represents. And she's always been, a big inspiration for me. And then the other one is Amy Keene, who I knew when she worked with the Carolina Panthers a long time ago. But her and I have been kind of like on this journey together again, like someone who I go to for advice and for help, and someone who just like she doesn't know how to not help people. Like that's literally like she was put on this earth to just help everybody. And so and she does an amazing job at it. So she's someone that's been, very influential and a role model for me and kind of how I've developed in my career. But those are two that I value greatly. And those were two of the, when I was doing my podcast a while back, like those are the first two people that I was like, would you please do this? And I think Andy was episode number 1 and Amy was soon after. So it's just two great people in this industry, two great people who've experienced a lot, who are both running their own shops at this point, that like they get it. And so if you need advice or you need help, like they're always open to helping and guiding in any way they can.
And fantastic shout outs to two people who are very, very good at what they do, and two just generally good humans as well. Like just cannot agree more with the shout outs. And how about you, Zach? Where can we find you as well as all things Pirates across digital social media?
I mean, LinkedIn's kind of the platform I use the most. Zach Galia on LinkedIn, ZJG on Twitter, but I don't use it as much anymore. I'm getting old and I'd spend most of my day on Pirates accounts anyway. So, and then anywhere you can actually think of finding social media content, we put it there. So if it's, Instagram or Twitter or Facebook or, YouTube or Blue Sky or WhatsApp or Threads or anywhere where you think content should be, I'm sure the Pirates are probably there. So
have you guys crossed that Rubicon of like Blue Sky and Threads are now platforms that we're going to be keeping on like servicing?
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things like we're not sure exactly how to use them quite yet. Cause like I was saying, like, I don't think Threads knows what Threads wants to be yet. And the same with Blue Sky. So it's like, we're fine tuning our approach so that when they figure it out, we'll be ready. And if it never gets to that point, then we'll make that call and move forward with something else. But, when people are flocking to a particular platform, we try to be there as early as we can just to see what it's all about. And then we kind of figure out its value for us, and if it's there or if it's not, and then we go forward from there.
Well, follow along, everybody. The Pirates had do a great job on social, and I will say too, like Zach, hit that follow button on Zach on LinkedIn. Especially last like year or so, he's really become just a great resource on there. Tons of insights, tons of knowledge, as you guys all heard on this interview. And Zach, I don't thank you enough for coming on the podcast today, sharing us with your wisdom, your experience, your knowledge. Just it's fantastic to be able to talk to you. And thanks again for coming on.
For sure, man. Yeah, I appreciate you having me, and I had a blast. It was a great conversation.
Just phenomenal stuff today with Zach Galia, Director of Social Media and Content Strategy for the Pittsburgh Pirates. I told you it'd be a great conversation, and he delivered and then some. Just an awesome, awesome person in the space. Tons of good knowledge, and really appreciate him sharing us his insight, his wisdom, his experience with us today on the podcast. Definitely watch out for the Pirates throughout the MLB season. As you heard from Zach, lots of good players to watch and lots of good stories to be told. But that'll do it for this episode of the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. Thanks again for listening. As always, I'm your host, Neil Horowitz. Hit me up on Twitter, NJH287. I'd love to hear from you. Also on LinkedIn, you can find me there. The website, dsmsports.net. And of course, subscribe to the podcast and preferred podcast platform. And also, I encourage you to check out Slyke, my other side project, slyke.co, where you can find collections and create your own as well and crowdsource content curation. But more importantly, as always, I thank you for listening. Stick around for future episodes. We'll see you soon on the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast.